Hello again. The other day I mentioned that lynchings in the United States were not all, or even mostly, directed against black people. During the 19th century, more white people were the victims of lynchings than were blacks. The other point I drew attention to was that black lynch mobs were every bit as common as white ones, and that many of the black people who ended up hanging from trees had been put there not by the Ku Klux Klan, but by their black neighbours. Today I want to address another popular myth, which is that all black people living in states such as Louisiana and Virginia in the south of the United States were slaves. Many were, but many were not. Those black people who were free and ran farms or plantations didn't hesitate to keep black slaves themselves, which may come as something of a surprise to some viewers. The thumbnail to this video shows a black man called William Ellison. He was one of the largest slave owners in South Carolina at the time that the American Civil War began. He was a staunch supporter of the Confederacy. Ellison bred slaves as though they were animals, selling the female children and generally keeping the males to work as field hands. He had a windowless building on the plantation where he chained up in the darkness those slaves who were not as obedient as he wished them to be. I'll give a link in the description to this video to a Wikipedia article about this awful man. There were many other black slave owners at this time. In Louisiana lived Antoine Duplaquet, who had a large plantation and over 100 slaves. I'll give a link to an article about him as well. I could go on listing many black people in the South who owned and even dealt in slaves. The point at which I am driving is that this simply overturns all that many of us think that we know about slavery in antebellum America. We have such a clear and distinct picture of the state of affairs. It was all wealthy plantation owners with gangs of black slaves, like Gone with the Wind or 12 Years a Slave. If the blacks stepped out of line, they were apt to be strung up by white mobs. This image is simply false, but it suits many people to perpetuate it anyway. A narrative in which all black people are slaves or victims of lynch mobs, while whites live a life of luxury on the proceeds of their labour, is just what is needed if you wish to make white people today feel guilty and also promote a festering sense of resentment among black people, a desire to get revenge for the historic injustices inflicted upon their ancestors. This, after all, is what Black History Month is all about. The whole practical aim is to create disharmony by constructing a misleading version of history. Hand on heart, how many viewers had ever heard of black plantation owners with slaves in Louisiana? Precious few, I'm guessing. That's the thing about history. It's complicated and messy. We construct simplified narratives about everything from Magna Carta to the Battle of Britain because it's easier to remember a myth which has been told in the form of a story than it is to delve too deeply into a lot of confusing facts. The transatlantic slave trade is just such a myth, which has been made easy to remember and simple to understand. Bad white men and good black people. The problem is that this particular myth, easy as it is to understand and remember, is causing a lot of problems for society, and I think it's probably about time that we ditched it.